make sure that the go live is happening on my iPad. Let's see. Not sure if we have anybody yet. And then I don't know if I need to record. Let's see. All right, well, hopefully this is just recording. So, and anybody who is here, they are hearing ridiculous things. All right, now it says we're live. Okay, I see this on the iPad. Perfect. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. So we had to reschedule from last week due to some illness because nobody likes being sick. It's very terrible. And so here we are this week, all healthy and ready to go. I'm so glad to be back here with Natasha. And this week we are talking about building confidence as a leader. The 4 topics that we are going to talk about specifically are going to be recovering from perfectionism, reframing the imposter, thinking strategically, and setting priorities. So, Natasha, I'm going to have you start us out today.
Yeah. Should we do introductions again or just get right into the topics?
Yeah, I guess we can. That's a great idea for new people. So go ahead and introduce yourself first, and then I go.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Natasha Marston. I am a certified professional coach based out in the Bay Area. My background is in human resources. So I've worked a variety of roles in talent acquisition, diversity, equity, and inclusion, performance management. My specialty is within performance and leadership. So I am big on working with folks and leveraging and honing in on their intrinsic leadership skills. How do we bring those out so you can maximize your performance at work and in life? And when I am not coaching, I'm planning my next international trip. So I just got back from Costa Rica, so I caught a little bit of a bug, which is why we had to delay this by a week. So hoping to just continue to travel the world and be a student of this wonderful planet. So that's a little bit about me. How about you, Alexandria?
Yes, my name is Alexandria. I am a leadership coach. I specialize in women in tech and other communities that have been marginalized in the tech space because it's very white male dominated. So we're trying to change that. My background, I actually come out of the therapy world originally. So I'm highly versed in a lot of psychological theory, lots of pieces of paper all over the place, and then fell face first into tech. Been there for about 7 years, and I wanted to bridge the gap. So the biggest piece that I saw is leadership and being a human-centered leader, remembering that everybody is still human, even though they've clocked into work. And while we work with computers all the time, we are not computers. So making sure that we keep that human-centered up front and that it's all about relationships. So the focus of my coaching is nonviolent communication and effective relationships and how we can be our best selves in them. And I'm not coaching. I'm reading and enjoying the beautiful city of Denver and getting up to the mountains as much as possible.
I love hearing your intro. It's so great. Awesome. So our first topic is about perfectionism. I think this affects everybody. I mean, who doesn't feel like making a mistake and failing is one of the worst things ever. It's easy for us to kind of catastrophize our mistakes, catastrophize our failures when things go wrong. When I think about perfectionism, I usually like to try to ask people, where do you think that comes from? That feeling and that desire to be perfect. I think humans overall have that desire because we put a lot of our self-worth and our value on doing things right, on being perfect, on this inherent need to feel safe and belong. We don't want to stick out too much, right? We want to create, we want to be part of the collective. So when we start to take that to an extreme and we start to want to achieve perfection, that's when other things start to falter. So usually in organizations, what leaders need to be aware of is, are your people starting to really hesitate in making decisions? Are they starting to give up too quickly on new pursuits and new ventures because maybe they haven't mastered it or they don't know what they're doing? when things just take too long to do things, like when you're starting to see time just kind of go by and you're not achieving the goals that you set out to do.
Mhm.
These are kind of those red flags. And so I usually like to share with my clients is understanding where this comes from. So not judging yourself as, less than because I struggle with perfectionism, because we all do. Accepting that the first time you do anything, it's not going to be good. I think, is it Brene Brown who said like effing first times? I think is like one of the things that it's like one of her topics. Um,
Probably.
yeah. And it's accepting the fact that, yeah, the first time you do anything, the first time you walked, you didn't really walk, you stumbled, right? But
Mhm.
you kept doing it and you kept trying. And then once you know that, you adjust. You adjust on what you're expecting of yourself.
Mhm.
People forget how easy it is to just set more realistic goals for themselves. I think we beat ourselves up and we want to shoot for the stars, which is great, but not when it's taken to an extreme. So that's usually what I like to share with clients, and what leaders need to be aware of within their organization. Some of those, when you're starting to see productivity falter because
Mhm.
people are stuck on being perfect.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on that?
I love all the things that you said, 100%, especially the piece about humans, like perfectionism and striving for greatness is innate. It's a big piece of like what we want to do. And we're always looking for better and what's next. And that's how we easily get caught on the hedonic treadmill, because we like do the thing and that's our next level. And we reset to like, oh, well, this newest level is my baseline. So now I have to keep going.
Mm,
And the whole thought process or story of perfectionism is false. Like, you're never going to be perfect. You can continue improving and getting better. And I believe that there's always room for that. But to strive for perfect, you're striving for the end, you're striving to never get better after that. Like, if that's the way we're framing it, that sounds a little boring to me personally. But also, I think one of the biggest quotes that stands out in my mind is your propensity for growth in one area is directly correlated to your ability to tolerate the opposite.
wow.
So, in order to be stronger, you have to be comfortable feeling weak while you're lifting weights, right? You're going to
Mm,
lift heavier and heavier weights, but every time you lift those weights, you feel weak.
mm,
But the fact is, you're actually getting stronger every time you do it. So, your ability to be better at something is directly correlated at the ability to tolerate not being good at it, and almost embracing the not being good at it, because that in and of itself is making you better.
mhm, mhm. That's so powerful to be at the same time at both ends of the spectrum,
Mhm.
to know your full weakness. It's almost like you have to surrender in order to actually achieve greatness. You kind of have
Mhm.
to completely let go, which is so hard. As humans, we have this deep need to control. We want to know what's going to happen. We want to be able to predict, how things are going to pan out. So to have to feel weakness in order to achieve strength, that is, yeah, it takes it to a whole new level of really understanding, um, that we're human, that we're not robots, and it's not a science. It's kind of just this ambiguous space and journey all the time.
Right.
um, I think another thing that I usually like to challenge folks on when talking about perfectionism and making things perfect is reminding people about the opportunity cost.
Mm.
So when you continuously work and chip away and churn over one deliverable, what are you giving up?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, where you're experiencing diminishing returns at that point, because what you're giving up is not working on the next deliverable and continuing to move things forward. So reminding yourself, is there value in being perfect,
Mhm.
or is there value in just progressing things forward and having things done? um,
Mhm.
because truthfully, people get value when they can actually use something. So when that deck is finished, when you're able to give the presentation, one of my favorite quotes is, I think, by Leonardo da Vinci. He says, "Art is never finished; it's only abandoned." So you can always make something better and perfect and refined, and feel free to do that. But reminding yourself that time is a finite resource and you only have so much of it. So, how do you want to continue to maximize that and be productive and continue to achieve all the other goals that you have?
Mhm.
So, reminding yourself of value, of time, um, and just yeah, what stakeholders are really wanting from you in your work. So yeah.
100%. That whole done is better than perfect, because
Mhm,
perfect doesn't ever exist, like we said. And
mhm.
so what happens if you never deliver? What happens if you never put it out there? How many things are you stopping yourself from? And you have to have it out there, because how else are you going to refine it and make it better? Our brains and our own feedback can only take it so far. It
Mhm.
has to be out in the world before it can really start to be tested and we know what needs to be changed,
Yeah,
because we may completely miss the mark on the thing we thought was important. But what's valuable to the stakeholder, what's valuable to the end user, what's valuable to the world may not be what we thought was valuable. And who's the end for? Is it for us or is it for somebody else?
yeah. Oh, so it's a collaborative. It needs to be a collaborative process because it is. We as humans, I think we're always trying to do something in service of another person. So
Mhm.
reminding yourselves of that bigger picture when you're creating a product, reaching a milestone, hitting a deliverable.
Mhm.
Um, I think, yeah, just reminding the end user, like you said, the additional stakeholders, all of that. So, um, yeah,
All right, so this is all easier said than done. Like, oh, that's great, Natasha. I'm fixed. It's magic. I can just think about it differently now, right?
yeah,
So how do we recover from it? How do we actually get to that next point?
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is constant reminding yourself of the principles that we've talked about, and it's
Mhm,
extending compassion to yourself, honestly. I think that's a huge one. I think plug for coaching as well. You kinda need to have someone in your court that is helping bring awareness to when you're starting to spiral out and kinda go back to that similar thinking, because perfectionism comes from fear, it comes from scarcity, it comes from, "I'm not enough," it comes
mhm,
from, I need to prove myself. So the first step is always just awareness of this and continuing to force yourself to kind of rewrite those thought patterns, rewrite those narratives in your head.
mhm,
And yeah, it is easier said than done, but I think continuing to practice at it, there's always going to be more and more opportunities that are going to challenge you. That it's going to your inner critic and your inner judge is just going to want to suck you back in and say, nope, this is tried and true how you were raised as a kid and how you developed your frames of thinking. It's worked because look how successful you are.
mhm.
But actively choosing to go from a survival mode to thriving mode,
Yes.
you need to want that. And sometimes it takes other people like coaches to help you stay in that mindset and keep you accountable in changing how you're thinking.
100%. Yeah, the keeping accountable and being able to get you out of that thought trench, right? Like our thoughts are so ingrained and so deep. Like anybody who skis, or I don't know, I'm sure there's other great examples, but when you like get into a groove, it's super easy to stay there. It's not so easy to go off into another direction.
Mm,
And so whichever one is deeper and has been there longer will win if you let it. And
mhm,
so, if you truly want to make a change and have that transformation into a different mindset, into a different pattern, you have to also make that ingrained, which takes, like you said, practice. It takes effort for a while. And then
mhm,
it gets easier a
mhm,
little bit at a time. So, again, it's that weightlifting, your ability to be stronger. You have to feel weak first. So, your ability to move through the perfectionism and you just practice it a little bit at a time.
Mhm.
So for some people who are seriously struggling with perfectionism, I would make your to-do list and find something that is low risk, low cost, that you can just do, and practice just doing and checking in with self while you're just doing and after you just do, so that you can be like, okay, this is safe. This is good. I feel accomplished. I feel happy. And attaching those positive thoughts to the just doing to
Mhm.
start to rewire that perfectionism trench.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's based in fear. Check the fear. What are you afraid of?
Mhm.
Is it
Mhm.
real?
Yeah. Oh God. That's yeah. Like, what is the other way I could be thinking about this? What's a
Mhm,
counter framing? Going back to creating a checklist, I think actually giving yourself time limits, like
mhm.
saying, I'm only going to work 1 hour on this deck. And
Yeah.
after that hour, I got to move on. There are other things that I want to do. And if I'm dedicated and focused and committed in that hour, that's my best and I'm giving my best. Actually giving yourself tangible boundaries around your work will
Mhm,
also help you kind of rein in that spin out of, oh, this could be better. This isn't, So creating that checklist,
mhm,
giving yourself time limits, giving yourself realistic goals, like I mentioned earlier. I think it's a lot of people, again, shooting for the stars. What can I get done? Low hanging fruit that I could attack today that keeps that momentum going. Okay,
mhm.
that feels good. I definitely feel motivated and encouraged to keep going.
Yeah.
So, those would be a few of my steps that I would recommend too.
Yeah. 100%. We need those dopamine dumps. Go after them. Go after them. Go get them.
Yep.
All right. So we talked about it a little bit. You called it a gremlin and you called it something else.
Judge,
The
critic,
judge,
Russian,
critic.
there's so many.
The infamous imposter syndrome, which Natasha, you and I have talked about this. So you are highly aware of my spicy opinions on the term imposter syndrome, but I'm going to share them anyway.
Yes.
I personally think that it's really unhelpful to be framing our protector, our critic, our movie guild, our directors. You can call them any number of things, but I really struggle with claiming that that part of self is a syndrome.
Mhm.
It makes it like it's a medical term, and it takes some of our own agency over it away because, oh, well, now it's a medical condition. So it's just something I suffer from. And so then it puts it in this thing of long term and forever. And it doesn't have to be. It can
Mhm.
actually be something that's super helpful and gives us a lot of information about us in that moment, the situation that we're dealing with in that moment, and an opportunity to grow right then and there. And our imposter shows up. Is it an imposter? Is it a bad part of self? Or is it a part of self that is just seeking safety and security? So is
Mhm.
it our protector who wants nothing more than us for us to be okay? And often the protector got set at a really young age because multiple things happened or something happened that you're like, ooh, all right, that almost got us kicked out of the circle and we're not going to do that again. That threatens us, right? But we're older now. We've lived differently. We learned things along the way. And so it's okay to venture off into that unknown. It's okay to live through that fear because we also, as our core self, want us to be safe and secure. And we're providing safety and security now. So we can say, thanks, protector. I really appreciate you showing up right now and having me look at this. Because that gave me the opportunity to say, is this really a skills gap? Is this really a problem that I can solve, that I can control? Or is this fear showing up, an ego showing up, and where I can soothe self and
Mhm.
show all the proof of all the ways I can do this, that I am qualified to do this, that I do know what I'm talking about, and really taking in the information for what it is and checking if it's true. And if it's something that needs to be done about, cool, that's easy. Now you go learn the thing. Now you go talk to the person. You have something that you can do to resolve that feeling from being there.
Mhm. Mhm.
What are your thoughts?
Excellent. I think what I love most about it is you're not judging that piece of yourself at all. You're not. And I think what a lot of people feel is that imposter syndrome is the only thing that they're suffering from.
Mhm.
It's something unique to them.
Mhm.
And the statistics, if you just look it up, I mean, everyone experiences imposter syndrome. It is more likely to be experienced by women
Right.
and people of color, which
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense based on the systems that we have in place, that lack of representation.
Mhm.
But even the higher up you go, a lot of people think once a person hits like CEO level or the C-suite, they no longer feel imposter syndrome because they've made it. So not true. So not true at all. It's actually the higher you go, the more likely you are experiencing imposter syndrome. And it makes so much sense. The world that we live in is you're over inundated with information. Social media, news, it's easy to compare yourself to other people, which is
Mhm.
imposter syndrome's favorite friend. And it's easy to say, I don't know anything when there is so much information out there.
Sure.
But that's what imposter syndrome does. That train of thought is addicted to cognitive distortions,
Mhm.
to um, amplifying your weaknesses, amplifying your limitations, and then completely downplaying and disregarding your track record of success. That's exactly what it does. So when you know that everyone's going through this,
Mhm.
that it is a cognitive distortion, it's not rooted in reality,
Mhm.
then you can remind yourself, okay, where is that kudos journal that maybe I've kept, or that kudos folder that I've
Mhm.
kept on my Outlook, where people have emailed me rave reviews about how well I did in that one meeting, for that one presentation, in that one idea I had, because it brings yourself back to reality. All that feedback is rooting yourself back into the real impact that you are making,
Right.
the actual performance that you have at work. Um, and I think it's important for organizations and for leaders to provide opportunities for people to actually come together and openly talk about this, for
Mhm.
it normalized, for it to be a very common employee resource group topic to bring up at a lunch and learn. Like it needs to always be front and center so that people don't feel alone, because again, imposter syndrome feeds on cognitive distortions, feeling isolated, you being unique to this phenomenon or this problem. When in actuality, it's just, again, it's a piece of yourself that grew up with you, but you don't need that anymore. You have the power and the choice to shed that those ways of thinking, that frame of thinking, in pursuit of something healthier, in
Mhm.
pursuit of something that helps you thrive and helps you grow exponentially farther than you were before. So um, it's it's just all those things. It's like I think there's another quote. It's the more you know you don't know.
Mhm.
Reminding yourself that there's always going to be there's always going to be somebody who knows more things that you don't know, but that shouldn't stop you from rising to the occasion and from learning and from continuously having that growth mindset.
100%. Like, it's always an opportunity to grow. It's always an opportunity to learn. And also the other thing, like, growth doesn't happen in comfort.
Mhm.
Like, it's okay to live through the fear. It's okay to act through the fear. And even to an extent, follow the fear. Because when the fear shows up, like, you've reached beyond something, or you're reaching out to something which is bigger and better and at minimum different. And if you can reach for more things that are different, then you have more experience and more thought, and you get to have more to offer in different scenarios. So it's always growth. And yeah, as leaders, we need to be able to talk about those things, being vulnerable with your team about, when do you feel your protector show up, and how do you deal with it? And
Mhm.
what is it that your protector, your movie directors show you and tell you most often?
Mhm.
Let them know that it's normal and that it's okay. And that's also why feedback, both positive and areas of opportunity, are important. Because if all your team hears from you is their areas of opportunity and they have no idea what they're doing well,
Hmm.
it's not going to go well.
No, no. I think also being able to set them up for success
Mm-hmm.
too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, before, obviously, feedback is always a gift. But if we know that imposter syndrome really strikes in those moments of something new, new promotion, new venture, new job, new project,
Mm-hmm.
being as clear as possible as a manager and a leader around what's expected, what they're going to be measured against,
Mm-hmm.
having those communication lines open, that already will suppress that imposter voice, because then that person has more of a chance to understand what they need to do in order to succeed. Um, and I think, to your point around giving feedback and making sure it's not just areas of improvement, you want to keep positive reinforcement at the forefront whenever you're giving feedback. How can you praise effort? How can you praise progress? How
Mm-hmm.
can you praise trial and error? It doesn't even have to be error. It's just trial. It's trial and then a lesson.
Yep.
That's really all it is. So if you are giving feedback in a way that's compassionate and framed and steeped within growth, in learning being the value,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily success, and this binary, like, did it go well or did it not go well, but as how did you grow and what are you going to do next with this newfound wisdom and this newfound learning,
Mm-hmm.
then that feedback, it doesn't cause anyone's defenses to go up,
Right.
because it's not an attack on them. It's a opportunity, and it's an opportunity to rise to the occasion, to grow, to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so keeping those nuggets at the forefront of when you're giving feedback as a leader, that's really important too.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Just to keep us on time, because we do have two other topics that we want to get to. I want to make sure that we get everything because I think the other two is super juicy also.
Yes. Yeah. Talking about thinking strategically. So, um, once you kind of, as a leader, you've wrapped your head around perfectionism and
Mhm.
reframing that, and then imposter syndrome. Next is how to be a strategic thinker. What can you do to ensure that that muscle is continuously being exercised? Um, to me, thinking strategically is equivalent to being able to predict the future as best as you can. No one has a crystal ball, but there are ways to be more forward looking, to be more future looking, to be able to predict, to be able to anticipate. Um, I think you would agree with me here. The best way to do that is to surround yourself with diverse thought, people who challenge the status quo, who play devil's advocate, who help you broaden your binary thinking again,
Mhm.
who look at decision making not just through speed and what's the quickest decision, but being able to think and be preventative in their solutions, in solutions that are more system wide, that again think more holistically. I think if you're able to anticipate and understand your market, if you're able to find patterns and interpret um, what's really happening underneath the surface, when you force yourself to gather even more information, and you set aside time to talk to people who think differently than you,
Mhm.
and you build those really strong relationships with different stakeholders, with people who disagree with you,
Mhm.
that's when you're able to think strategically, because thinking strategically is not going to be found with blinders on. It's always going to be found with being able to think beyond yourself and beyond your narrow view of the world. So,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that that's 100%. Like you're being able to understand the market, and we're always attempting to predict the future. And the
Mhm.
best predictor of the future is what's happened in the past. So being able to understand the data and even specifically what data to look at to give you the answer that you actually want, because you can look at data all day long. And if you're not looking at the right data, you're not getting the right answer. So you have to have even an understanding of what kind of data do I need? How would I know that I achieved the thing that I'm attempting to achieve? And then go
Mhm.
find the data that supports or goes against it. And I think the other thing to really think about too, like not only, like you said, keeping the very diverse thought and perspectives around, because it forces us again out of our thought trenches. We're all fish in water. The only thing we know is our experience in the world. And to assume that somebody else thinks exactly like us is very human, but it's also very flawed. Like nobody else thinks like us because nobody else had that experience except for us. So
Yeah.
making sure that we do say things out loud and that
Mhm.
we get feedback. And I think knowing where you are in the process of solution creation. Are you in the divergent planning and just we want as many options as possible? And
Mhm.
so then we're going to yes and it. Anybody's idea that they bring in, we're going to say yes and we're going to add to it. And we're just going to watch divergent thought just get bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a time for cutting later. There's
Yeah.
a time for refining later. First, we want to see everything that could possibly be an option,
Mhm.
and then we go from there.
Mhm.
Because making a decision like this can be really harmful. You may, to your point a while ago, miss opportunity
Mhm. Mhm.
because you made a snap choice. And so an exercise I super enjoy for getting your brain kind of in that crunching and just thought and what's possible. Because I know for adults sometimes we get stuck in the, well, it's not possible, so I'm not going to say it out loud. But
Mhm.
somebody may have solved for it. And so bringing in an element of play of what's possible can be really helpful. So I
Mhm.
have this exercise that I got from his name is Alex Hermosi. He is a gym sales and acquisition person. He does tons of sales stuff. And in one of his books, he does the brick exercise. So you do 120 seconds, just fully focused, and you brain dump all the things that you can possibly do with the brick.
Mhm.
And you go through that exercise, set a timer, all the things. And I was attempting to do it. And at the end of the exercise, it was so eye opening because I realized how stuck in a thought I got myself. And immediately my brain latched on to just your standard red building brick. And
Mhm.
so my list was actually pretty small because I made all kinds of assumptions without asking questions or brainstorming on all the possibilities. So one of the things that he does at the end of the exercise that he presents is he said, "Did you ask what kind of brick it was?" Because if you don't know what kind of brick it is, it could be any number of things.
Mhm.
It could be anything from a paperweight to a garden if it's a cinder block with holes in it. Did you ask what size it was, the material it was made out of? If not, then you've got tons of more options. And he just like listed like 100 of them off. And I was like, man, I got to like five. So practicing exercises like that, where you have this pretty ambiguous thing to start with, and then just play with it. Where can it go? Open up that what if mind space.
Mhm. Mhm.
What about you? Do you have any tactical ways of practicing thinking strategically?
Yeah, I mean, besides the yes and really brainstorming, I think it's actually giving yourself time to sit down and write even the most outlandish things that you think is impossible as you were explaining. You can do this by yourself or you can do this with a coach because that's really where the magic is actually not rooting your ideas in reality because
Mhm.
really what that is that your reality is your own formulation of just what you've thought or what you've been taught to believe is possible. So
Right.
challenging yourself to think completely outside of the box and giving yourself that time and that space to do that is really important. I
Mhm.
think in creating those spaces with teams, um, ensuring that, as you were mentioning, you're never shutting down ideas ever, like not in that moment. You want that
Mhm.
full whiteboard up there, and you don't want to stop any idea before it's fully cooked in a person's mind. So I think bringing out those values of inquiry and curiosity,
Mhm.
and continuing to let people kind of just go where their mind takes them. I think that's just an easy, simple way, is to just write things down, get everyone in a room, and don't interrupt anyone, and give everyone a time to speak, and continuing with that yes and exercise. So, but I mean, I love that brick example, because it's in the simple act of just asking those questions. So feeling comfortable enough to ask those questions, to say, what kind of brick is it? Okay, well, why are we thinking about the solution in this way? Is there another layer that we might be missing? Or what if we're not bound by this time frame? What if we can do it this way? So always giving yourself the opportunity to ask those questions, and creating an environment where everyone else feels comfortable to ask those questions too.
Yeah, which I think brings back to the another point is start where are you going? Like, what
Mhm,
are you doing? What's the intention? What's the purpose? Because that hones in the list differently than how many things can you do with a brick?
mhm,
Well,
mhm,
we're trying to build something.
mhm.
Well, now how many things can you do with a brick, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so having some understanding of where we're going or what the purpose is or the problem we're trying to solve, all of that is helpful information to bring to your team if you want more effective strategy meetings is
Mhm,
you can hone that in and we have some responsibility to do that
mhm,
unless you purely are in the we got to make this department better, right? Something that big and wide, where do you start, right? And that could be fine. Or is it we need to increase our sales numbers by 15%? Like this is the non-negotiable. We need to increase our sales numbers by 15%. If that's non-negotiable, say it's non-negotiable.
mhm,
And then everything else assume that it is negotiable.
mhm,
Like by when? And if it's by the end of the quarter, that's also a non-negotiable. Okay, well, that changes our framing and our thought and how we want to attack this.
mhm, mhm. That is so key. Understanding what's fixed and what's not fixed.
Mhm.
And I think, and I know we'll talk about this with priorities, but beginning with the end in mind, knowing what the end goal is, what the vision is, what you're trying to achieve,
Mhm.
and then creating and brainstorming those ideas from that.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of folks, a lot of leaders feel that strategic thinking is kind of left to them,
Mhm.
when everyone, if you enable your people, everyone has the ability to think more strategically, to think beyond their functional areas, and to look more holistically at the problem, at the organization. um, and so providing these opportunities, giving, those tangible examples of the brick um, of creating those spaces for those questions to be asked and those ideas to be shared fully. That's how you, that is how, as a leader, you don't feel the full weight of being a strategic thinker on yourself.
Mhm.
So, and that leads to confidence overall, which I know is our big topic. So,
Well,
yeah.
building confidence as a leader absolutely is practice and following through with things. Because one of the things that I think about confidence that makes it so elusive and people's attachment to, oh, I want that executive presence. And what makes it so hard for people to attach to is it is a highly individual journey that it's very much about you
Mhm,
versus one way to gain confidence or one way to be confident. And I think what we end up seeing is our normal human trait is to go mimic. And we
mhm,
say, oh, okay, this person is confident, this person is confident, this person is confident, they stand up straight, they wear this, they speak like this. And that becomes mimicry. And then we're really good mimes. We're really, really good mimes. But if we're not attached to it here and we're not attached to it here, that's when the protector shows up and the
mhm.
gremlin shows up. That's where the fear of they're going to catch me because I don't actually feel confident. I'm just playing confident on TV.
Yeah.
So we actually have to do those things that attach the feeling and the thought of confidence, which is happiness and pride in what we're doing,
Mhm.
to the things that we're doing, which means we've accomplished something that was important to us. We have created tasks and projects and accomplished them in a way that feels good for us, which
Mhm.
means the confidence journey is highly individual, and why a coach can be so helpful in that, or a therapist or a group of some sort can be so helpful in that, because sometimes we have to reconnect with self before we can even hope to understand what that looks like or means.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like you
Absolutely.
said, the higher up you go, the worse the critic wants to be, because you have a smaller and smaller group of people that you're comparing yourself to. And the reality is they don't know any more about it than you do.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you
Yeah.
go, ask, what makes you so confident? They're going to be like,
I don't know. I
"Mhm,
haven't figured it no one's really figured it out. I know, I think, one of my other favorite quotes on confidence is action cures fear.
mhm,
It's continuously practicing, um, continuously exposing yourself to that thing that scares you, to whatever that trigger is, what that stimulus is, and realizing that you don't have to be afraid of it anymore.
mhm,
Um, and you mentioned something else about aligning to what your true passion is,
mhm,
because once you really love something and you've dedicated yourself to something,
mhm,
it almost it helps you realize that all those other more worldly fears don't really matter because your
mhm,
purpose is so much bigger than that. So I think confidence stems from that true passion, that true joy, and that true engagement in doing something you love, in doing something that fully aligns with your truth, your gifts, your talents. Um, so it's continuously practicing in order to not be afraid of whatever that trigger is, and reminding yourself of your why.
mhm,
Why am I doing this? What motivates me, and keeping that
mhm,
at the forefront too.
mhm. Yeah, and specifically thinking about, like, yes, you should always know your why in general. Why are you a leader?
Mhm,
Why at this company? Why this team? What are you attaching to as important and valuable and beneficial,
mhm, mm,
especially on the hard days?
yeah,
'Cause there's always hard days, regardless of how much you love something, there's hard days,
mhm,
which is why we set priorities, right? Because on the hard days,
mhm.
it is sometimes hard to be focused.
Yeah, yeah, totally
Yeah.
true.
What are your thoughts on setting priorities and where to even begin? Because that is a ball and a half of spaghetti for sure.
Yes. I think I kinda mentioned it earlier, but to talk about it more in depth, it's, again, beginning with the end in mind. One of those highly effective habits, I think by Stephen Covey, right?
Mhm,
It's beginning with the end in mind. So knowing what the vision is of your organization first and foremost, and then knowing what your own goals are for yourself, how
mhm,
you wanna improve as a leader, looking also at the feedback maybe that you've received on areas of opportunity.
mhm,
So bringing that into consideration as well. Knowing your team, knowing the capabilities of your team, the gaps of your team, the health of your team,
mhm,
knowing how you'll be measured and how you'll be evaluated next performance cycle. So keeping all of these things in mind, that's how you can anchor to priorities that are relevant, that align, because you want to know what everyone else's goals are, what your own goals are, and what's possible based on the resources that you have.
mhm,
Um, Once you have that figured out, you have those goals figured out, you kind of work your way backwards in terms of, okay, then how does that help me create and refine my monthly priorities? And
mhm,
how does that help me create and refine my weekly priorities?
mhm,
Because we all know it is so easy to get into the grind of the day. And next thing you know, all those top priorities that you had from the week the 1 to 3 you had for the day are out the window because now
Mhm.
you're putting out fires. Oh, this is an urgent thing that I need to do. And
Mhm.
it's easy to get wrapped up in doing what's urgent instead of doing what's important.
Yeah.
And knowing that there is a difference. What's urgent is critical in time and it needs to be done now. But if you continuously neglect what's important, things like strategic thinking, things like hiring new people, things like developing trusted relationships with your stakeholders, if you
Mhm.
continue to neglect that, your priorities will falter too, because those are all really big pieces of that pie. Um, so I'll stop there in terms of priorities, but what would you add for that?
No, I think that that's all great, and you 100% like, knowing where you're going is super helpful. And also with this the loose understanding that there isn't a perfect or individual way to get there.
Mhm,
And so you can take lots of different paths to get there, but having that end allows you to recalibrate anytime you kind of get distracted off of it when too many urgent things come up
mhm,
and you come back to it. The other thing that I really like to do when I'm setting priorities overall, and it depends on, are you doing your year plan? Are you doing your quarterly plan? Are you doing your monthly, your weekly, or your daily? And I think that breaking them down like that is super helpful. And having a roadmap in front of you is also very helpful. And again, being realistic, like you have said a couple of different times, 100% be realistic. Do not have a list of 10 things to do in a day. We're not capable. Like, as
mhm,
humans, we can't focus on that many things. And every once in a while, you're going to get it, and that's going to be great, and that's fantastic. But to not beat yourself up on the days that you only get 3 things done, and being realistic in that. You can always find something else to do if you finished everything.
mhm,
And I like to use a quadrant. And so we've got high value and we've got low value and we've got then or high cost and low cost. And the things that we want to do first are going to be the highest value and the lowest cost. So,
mhm,
what are those options and how do you integrate those? And then you can start working on the bigger and bigger fruit after that. But
mhm,
most often, the thing that is a low benefit and a high cost, you're not even going to want to do anyway. And if you do it, you're going to do it so far down the road that your initiatives and your focuses have probably already changed.
yeah.
But if you can really move that train along by getting ones that are really high value and low cost, and that cost could be money, that cost could be time, it could be efficiency. There could be lots of different things that you equate to cost, but there is a cost at some point. So acknowledging that and equating it to value is going to be a lot easier to set those priorities long term. And to have your team and empower your team to start thinking that way as well. Because empowering your team to think strategically, like we already talked about, and help you set priorities not only develops them as team members, it takes some of the burden off of you. And it also is a good way to check if you've been a micromanager and you've been dictating and in the authoritarian position. Because if everybody is mum's the word in a meeting and afraid to make decisions and afraid to speak up, it shows you that you have a low trust environment and that you've maybe been micromanaging and that you haven't created the safety for dissent. And all of those things are really, really important if we want to be strategic and be innovative and be a difference in the market.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. I think especially for newer leaders, they do tend to operate like it's all on their shoulders because they're bringing in that same mindset of being a manager, of focusing on the operational.
Mhm,
And you have to shift into how do I enable and empower my team? Because as a leader, you're not supposed to know everything and you're not supposed to do everything. You're there to empower, you're there to remove roadblocks, you're there to lead strategic thinking as we've discussed.
mhm,
Um, Another tip I think in terms of priorities is knowing what to do before how to do it.
mm,
So being effective, it's doing the right thing and then focusing on doing things right on the efficiency after.
mhm,
So that is a really helpful exercise on picking, what is high cost or low cost and high value, so that you know that you're focused on the right things earlier on that will maximize overall performance. Because at the end of the day, everything feels important, everything feels urgent. But if you know that you have these two competing goods and time is a finite resource, how do you make that decision? And using that quadrant is a good example, and focusing on being effective first versus being efficient.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I completely agree. It also it's those less than tangible things. How do you create environments of trust for your people so that they can take and run with whatever you delegate to them, so you're focused on the bigger fish?
Mhm. 100%. Yes. I love everything that you just said. So wrapping up, I want to see if there is anybody out there who has any questions. You can throw them in the chat. We would be more than happy to answer questions that we have availability to now. We can also respond to them later as we have time. So go ahead and throw those in there if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today. While we're doing that and we're waiting for any of those to come through, Natasha, would you like to share with people where they can find you if they want to work with you?
Yes, please find me just on LinkedIn. You can send me a direct message if you're interested in working with me. I'll be happy to start a conversation and we can talk about what that looks like.
Yeah. You can find me on all the socials at To Living Audaciously and on my website. Some exciting things that I've just released is my book finally got officially released and published on Amazon. So that's pretty exciting. It's the Audacious Crash Course in Leadership. So it goes through the three main things that I think are important for all new leaders to know: knowing yourself, know your team, and then how do you apply it. Other exciting things, Natasha and I will be having some more things coming up, which we'll release as we have more information. And I will have a new podcast coming out in August. So please stay tuned for all of those things and get announcements. If you'd like to work with me, you can get on my waiting list on my website. And I look forward to talking to you all. So I haven't seen any questions come through. There are a few of you in here with us. Give you one more opportunity to put those into the chat. You don't see anything different on your end, do you? I've only seen one
I
comment come through, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing anything on my end.
All right. Do you have any thoughts that you want to wrap up with today?
No, I mean, I think building confidence as a leader, it takes time and it takes effort. It takes reframing those thought patterns that we talked about and rewiring those neural circuits that we have in our brain. And I think I would always tell people, share those feelings of feeling inadequate, of when you're feeling alone, ask for help, because people have definitely been in your shoes before. People want to see you succeed. So if you're struggling with being perfect, if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, if you're not sure how to think strategically, it's always a good idea to bring someone along on the journey with you, whether it be a coach, a trusted colleague, your trusted board of directors. Ask for help, reach out. People want to see you shine like the star that you are. So always giving that